Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. So last time we very few slides remaining. Actually, we discussed about 1G and problems and all that, and then we just touched about the thin film solar cells. That is the 2G type of solar cell. Now the last one is the third generation solar cells. Of course, now the problem is there are so many what you call ways of achieving 3G, but I'm not going to into detail, but just I'm going to touch a few points so that you can understand what are the things going on. So overview only. Of course, as this topic is silicon and I also work on silicon, so I would like to show you some silicon nanostructures for this for the tandem cell. Here what we do is, of course, I have explained the tandem cell. Okay, so we are tuning the band gap. That is the whole point over here. So obviously we cannot, in the previous one I have shown you that, we require different materials, and when the materials are different, the properties are different, deposition characteristics are different, so control becomes very difficult. So instead of that, if you have got only one material, that is silicon, throughout the cell, that would be the advantageous thing. But the problem is silicon has got a fixed bandwidth. But if we make it in a nanostructured form, we can control the band gap. So this concept is called as the band gap engineering, where we control the size of the silicon particles, and when those particles are less than 5 nanometer size, we call it as quantum dots. Okay. So here you can see the formula. So Eg bulk is 1.1 plus K divided by D square. K is some constant and D is the size. So virtually what we are getting is when you increase the particle size, the band gap is going to, when you decrease the particle size, band gap is going to increase. So if it is to be done, this is the comparative result. Either, of course, I will not go into the quantum physics of this, but I will tell you that silicon only is not possible. Near to that, around silicon, so that there is a quantum confinement can occur, you require some insulator, and that can be silicon dioxide or silicon nitride. So depending upon which one you use, you can also use silicon carbide. So depending upon the size of this dot, and depending upon the material which you are using, we get the energy. So for example, in here, if we are using silicon dioxide matrices, then you can see around for 4 nanometer, 1.5 is the band gap, so that is higher. If we go further down, if it is 1, roughly around 2. So we can now vary the band gap of silicon from 1.1 to about 2.1 electron volt. So the structure remains the same, material is the same, only we have to put different size of this silicon nanoparticles so that you get the different band gap, and accordingly the absorption of the spectra will differ. So this is how silicon quantum dots can be applied. So we can produce quantum dots by various methods. I will show you one of the picture. This is what we synthesize, and I think this is the first time you are seeing atoms. So whatever these dots which are arranged here, these dots are nothing but the silicon atoms, and this complete the exact orientation or the systematic arrangement of the atoms, you can say it as that is one silicon nanoparticle. This is of around 7 nanometers, and whatever is outside is just the grid on which we put this quantum dots. So this is the atom, and this is how you can see that we are manipulating basically atoms. Few atoms can change in few atoms can change the whole characteristics. And what happens exactly is this. If we put it in liquid and we pass certain lights, you can see that depending upon the size of the particle contained in the solution, you will have different color output as the size varies, the output will be varies. So you can understand that basically we are trying to change the absorption spectra of this. So similarly, not only silicon, we can control the band gaps of another materials as well, and depending upon their exciton Bohr radius, If we go below that particular size, we get the quantum dots, and then the quantum world is quite different than what the real world is. It doesn't behave like what we expect, and it can be accommodated into solar cells. So as I've said, it's a very large picture, and there are so many technologies simultaneously being investigated to improve the efficiency and decrease the cost. So NREL, that is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is in US, is perhaps the topmost body which validates the results. So suppose it's like Guinness Book World Record. Okay, so NREL maintains what is the record for a particular technology in solar cell which is achieving the efficiency. It tests the cells and it approves it. So you can see this is the very complex chart, and every month it is published. Okay, so you can see here right hand side, these are the efficiencies which are written for the best cell in a particular technology. So we have got multiple technologies here. Crystalline silicon, that is 1G. So these are single junction, some are triple junction, multi-junction solar cells. Then we have got thin film and emerging PV, that is what our 3G is. Okay, so you will see that the blue ones are the crystalline solar cells, and more for about 20 years or so, the efficiency is more over constant. Again, some of them are the laboratory efficiencies, not necessarily that it has been transferred to the industry and they are producing it, but this is the maximum possible. So most of the time it is a lab efficiencies. So you will see that it is saturated, and that is what I was talking about. But whereas if you see the newer technologies which are in orange somewhere over here, you can see these efficiencies are going up absolutely. They are still the contenders. So they have now achieved somewhere around 10 to 12%. However, as compared to the established one, they are quite low. Then the maximum efficiency, if you talk about, it is for the multi-junction. See, 4-junction solar cell is over here. Fraunhofer Institute is in Germany. It is one of the leading one in as far as this solar energy is concerned. Then we have got Boeing Spectrolab. You can also see so many companies are there, but NREL, Spectrolab, Fraunhofer, these are some of the leading companies. And apart from that, the companies which are already into the solar cell fabrication, but which are commercially doing it, they are also here. You can see LG Electronics, GE Global Research, Mitsubishi, United Solar. So these are the companies which are already into this particular business, and they are trying their best so that they can achieve the maximum efficiencies. So of course, this particular graph is going to change every month, and you can always check it. This graph is also published by one of the leading journal, so Progress in Solar Photovoltaics, which is again edited by Martin Green from Australia. So the point is, what are in general, if we are to talk about policies or if we are to increase the penetration of solar sector or solar power production, what are the major challenges? Some of them I have already revised or already told to you, so it's a kind of revision. So most of the manufacturers lack the scale. So for example, BHEL, that is BHEL, it is one of the Navratna companies. They have got hardly 50, 100 megawatt. Okay. Tata, they produce about 50 megawatt. In the recent times, because of the China's aggression and all that, the problems are so much that the price of the solar cell produced in India was much higher. So it was always better to import it from China. So many stopped the expansion even after we had our first semiconductor policy in around 2003. So semiconductor sector is, it never started at all. None of the companies are vertically integrated. Already I've explained this, right from silicon, refining to making the module and installing it. Not a single company does. There are in every sector you will see the different companies. So vertical integration is a problem. And amount of development of technology is relatively low. But however, in recent times, because of some or other reason, we are picking up there is always a center, National Center for Photovoltaic Research and Education, is situated at IIT Bombay. They have really started in collaboration with the industry. So in general, not only in solar, in general, government is keen now that there would be a academia industrial partnership, and that is where the research and development has got some bright future in India. As I've told, this whole energy is, because as it is an essential need, it is quite governed by the Indian government and also the state governments. So there is always, it depends on policy, how exactly this sector is going to grow. And as far as this national policy structure is concerned, it is defined by so many policies and in acts. So you can see Electricity Act was amended after about 50 years in 2003, and under which there are so many other agencies which are working in together with a particular objective. Then we have got electricity policy in 2005. Especially the smart grid and renewables required something called as open access policies. Then tariff structures, so that is defined by the national tariff policy. So all these came into picture, and then we felt the need of renewable power, because it is like a late arrival. And there are certain good things which are done in renewable power, which was supported by the Electricity Act, like I have said, open access. So this renewable power, for example, every electricity or power producer must increase the power production by about 2% every year. So that's a huge percentage, and that is why if you see the news, many power producers they are tying up with some other company or on their own. They are increasing their renewable power installations every year. Okay, so apart from that, it is obviously associated with Niti Aayog, National Action Plan for Climatic Change, because global warming is one of the major threat, and renewable power is obviously one quick solution for that. But as far as I've said, NCPRE, so that is the Center for the Research and Education. So there was a mission, Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, which defined how exactly in solar we are going to go forward, and how that can, if there is a framework or guidelines set, how that can help all the stakeholders, may it be power producer, or may it be the state policy makers or whatnot. So all these institutes combinedly work together, so that the sector goes ahead and there is a positive growth. And this all happened somewhere between 2006 and 2010. And after that, really we have made leaps of development, and that's why we were able to achieve whatever the statistics I had shown you in the earlier class. And apart from this, there are so many other agencies as well. I have told you about the Central Electricity Regulation Commission, CERC, SECI, which is the company which actually looks into the tendering and installment process of the power plants, solar power plants. So these other agencies are also there, but they don't make the policy. They just execute whatever the policy which are created in the framework of what we have. So JNSM was the real push forward, and you can see this is very old. I mean, when it formed, there was a vision that what we are going to achieve, and interestingly, we have surpassed whatever the targets we had. But interestingly, still one thing we are lacking, that research is still not that great. Second thing is the skilled labor. That is another issue, and semiconductor is still a problem. We are not manufacturing the cells. Okay, we are good with power production. That's all. That is only one great thing that we have achieved. Already I have talked about this socio-economic impact. First of all, this PV solar electricity is decentralized in nature. So it can be modular, it can be isolated, and it is not concentrated like a thermal power plant. So if 4,000 megawatt supercritical plant is there, it is located only in one one village. Okay, that much size it requires. However, when it is a 4,000 megawatt solar plant, you can consider that even if we are talking about 10 to 50 megawatts, still it will be spread in 80 villages. Okay, so that is the biggest advantage of this. then the commercial maturity has been reached. Also, as I've said, rooftop solar installations, it is income generating. So, for example, big power companies can go for 1 megawatt, 5 megawatt, or 50 megawatt power plant. But suppose you and me, retail power, what is a producers, if we want to do some business, it is possible now. Or even some institutes, for example, our NIT itself, we have got 1 megawatt power plant. So now we have started generating out of it, and we now get some income out of it. Okay. So same thing can be done even on a small household. You can install up to if you install up to 1 kilowatt, it requires about 100 square feet area. That is possible even in a society, right? So you get some additional income and you save some, you also help in power production. But apart from that, already I have explained, there are so many other applications of isolated PV which are really important, especially in the remote areas, and that can be achieved, and it can create a real socio-economic impact in generation of employment, in what you say, giving some getting some labors and services at cheap prices. Land availability might be cheaper when you are going for remote village. And by the way, that is one of the also advantages why Gujarat and Rajasthan is leading, because most of the land there is inhabited, and that is almost free of cost. Okay. However, it requires certain infrastructure, water availability, grid connection availability, land availability. All these things are also required. However, as far as labor is concerned, let me tell you, 1 megawatt plant require only 5 or 6 people to operate in at least in 2 shifts. Okay, so it may not generate actual employment too much. But if you think of the module production, cell production, then the services and repairing, so if everything goes hand in hand, it's a quite good business to start with. So as I've said, policies are continuously being updated. Some states have revised their policies about third time now this year. So what are the key points? So what you can see that really going to boost up the sectors are these: accelerated depreciation. Obviously, then for 1 megawatt, roughly the cost is 3 to 4 crores. So this is obviously borrowed from the banks, and then there should be some benefit for this. So that is given in terms of the accelerated depreciation. So if the standard depreciation is 10%, we can give it 50% or 40%. In this case, earlier it was 30, now it is increased to 40. What does it mean? So for 4 crore, 40% is 1.6 crores. So in the first year itself, if I take that depreciation, I need not to pay tax on that 1.6 crore rupees. So that is how it decreases the tax. Then there is protecting local solar panel manufacturers. These are different from solar cell. So safeguard duties is what to say, imposed on the panel, import. That was 25%, but now after this China problem, that will be doubled. It will be almost 40 to 50% as the minister has announced. Then we have got some subsidies, as I've said, for rooftop power plants up to 500 kilowatt. Then the renewable energy certificates for whatever the financial institute that whatever the green power is being generated. Though this is useful for carbon credits. So certain companies, if they put power plant, they can claim carbon credits. So that is advantage. Net metering incentive, I have already explained that you can go for a rooftop, and net metering means, let us say you are producing the power and you are selling it for 4 rupees. In the daytime. However, in the night time, you take the power because nighttime solar is not available. Let us say if you are taking 7 rupees, so net metering will tell you that you have to only give 3 rupees. Okay, but that doesn't happen like that. It happens rather the other way around. Normally, you are the larger producer than consumer. So if you produce say 10 unit per day, probably you are consuming 3 or 4 units only. So that's why those 6 units you can earn on that. Then other thing is, let us say, because of the subsidy and policy, everybody, hypothetically, everybody installs a power plant on the rooftop. The point is, power is also a commodity. Okay, so unless there is a customer for that, the prices are going to fall. Again, demand and supply law. So to secure the feasibility and sustainability of such a plants, there is something called as power purchase agreement. So there is a determined tariff for the solar power, which is kind of mandatory for the purchaser to purchase at. Also, there is something called as energy exchange. It is listed at NSE. Please check on that. So what does it mean? Like other commodity exchanges, the power is also exchanged, and it's literally like demand. Depending upon the demand, the consumer can order. Okay, they can order 1 day ahead or 7 day ahead or even 1 hour ahead, and it's literally auction. So that power exchange is a auction house. But basic power, basic price of that power is always being given to the solar power producer. Of course, in auction, if he gets more, that's great. Okay. Then next, interstate transmission systems, charges and losses. These are important point whenever you want to transfer the power from one place to another on open access. So what is the concept? Let me tell you. Suppose I have got an industry in Rourkela, but Rourkela is not that good because of certain reasons, solar power production. So I wish to put a plant in, let us say, Gujarat, because it is better over there because of again the same reasons. So I'm producing the power in Gujarat and I want to consume it in Rourkela, Odisha. So what I can do is I can wheel them, I can transmit them over the transmission lines, and these are whatever the charges which are incurred are called as the wheeling charges. So of course there will be some loss, as you have learned in power systems. So these transmission charges and losses are not levied during this PPA agreement period, and that is again saving some money. Of course, subsidy is already there and in various forms. So that's all about the introduction part. And for all these, I have referred so many what you call references. You can always check them and you can always go through it. So I think this particular lecture, you must have got a fair idea about what exactly this whole solar power sector is, what is the R&D going on, how policy controls it, what we need to do or what we can do. So all this lecture gives you a fair idea about this. So meanwhile, we proceed to any quick question, 1 or 2 questions. Anybody having questions? No? Okay, that's interesting. Shreyas Patel, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So how is everything? Technically, the things are fine.
Yes, sir.
You're getting the connections and everything. So internet
Yes,
connection.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Connection
Rudranandan Mishra. Rudranandan Mishra. Mishra ji.
Present, sir. Present, sir.
Okay. Udesha Dixit. Udesha Dixit.
Present, sir.
Vaibhav Sarolia.
Present, sir.
Swastik Pulak.
Present, sir. Present, sir.
Rajat Panda.
Yes, sir.
Siddharth Satpathy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Last time I think you all joined very late. Okay. So make sure that you are right on time for the lectures. Fine. Okay. So I think that if there are no questions.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I have a question. Sir, as you said that
Yes.
solar power in the long run is actually in a sense free. So can we just install a solar panel and not pay charges or taxes? Can we do that, or that is not allowed? Like we have to pay some charges or taxes.
Wait. What you ask in long term? What you said long term?
Sir, like in long term, we are just receiving solar power and utilizing it. So can we do that? Keep doing that? Like,
See, point is understand the cost. Okay, somebody has to install the solar panel. Fine. Now the point is that cost is still huge for the panels. If you in retail sector, if you take a 40-watt panel, roughly it is around 3,500 rupees. Roughly, I can say that it is about 80 to 90 rupees per watt. Okay, if you go on a larger sector, larger what you say, 1 megawatt or 5 megawatt panels, then you will get it at around 30 to 40 rupees per watt. That is what the point is. So now, of course, we can do it, but we need money. From where are you going to get the money? Government cannot just buy just one, solar panel. If government buy Rafale, there is a problem. If government doesn't buy Rafale, there is a problem. Okay, so if they started just doing, buying the solar panels or installing it, already Adani is in problem. So that is the whole point. It's about the solar policy matter. And whenever the sector is young, government has laid that path. And let me tell you, maybe in 3 or 4 years, the government will go out of this whole thing, and the what you call it as market dynamics will be controlled by the market itself without any intervention from the government. Are you getting my point? Okay, so
yes. So
because I'm not very clear about your question, I think that is what you meant, or anything else.
So okay. No, so it means that few years down the lane we'll be not receiving any subsidies, or the government will not incentivize. Okay.
Yes. That is
Okay, sir.
that is one thing, and you have to understand. I hope you have heard about WTO, World Trade Organization, right? So, World Trade Organization, India is a part of that. Of course, that deals with every trade, but moreover, they are worried about the agricultural side as well. Because that is the backbone. So if you see, one of the prime requisite of World WTO or such an organization is that nations should not be giving any subsidy to farmers. And there comes the biggest problem. That was the whole debate all about. So suppose I don't give a subsidy to Indian farmers, government doesn't give the subsidy. What will happen is their commodity will be at higher cost. Then the outsiders, I mean foreigners, if they sell the commodity, it will be obviously at lower cost, right? So what I'm going to purchase? Now, whatever the conflict between India and China, why we purchase Xiaomi phone? Because it is cheaper, right? So same thing can happen about any commodity. So to control this, there are two ways. One, to give the subsidy. Another thing is to levy import charges, right? So all this depends also on the foreign affairs. Okay, so if we want to make these installations very cheap and all that, every dynamics has to taken into consideration, and something cannot happen overnight. Okay.
Okay.
Is that fine?
Yeah.
Of course. The point is that economics is a major player. That's why I'm explaining all these things. But the issue is that it's a vast subject and not our prime objective. Fine. So anyway, I think I have answered as much as possible your question. But of course, we can discuss offline. So let us move towards the next topic. If nobody has got a question. So next topic, as I've said, for us, light is the most important part. And I think half of you took my last illumination in that illumination system design. I think I have explained a few points why light is important and how electrical engineers are associated with that. So anyway, for solar photovoltaics, definitely sunlight is the most important part. We cannot have artificial lights over here. In illumination, we can have artificial light. That's the only difference. I'm very sure you recognize this bridge, right? Hello? 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 Is anybody there? Yeah.
Yes.
So my point is, this is the Panposh bridge, correct? Yeah, fine. Anyway, so let us talk about the properties of sunlight. If we can estimate the sunlight, estimate how much power the panel can receive, then that is the input. Then we know the system and we can find out the output, and accordingly we can go for the system design. So in the system design, the very first stage is to estimate the sunlight. So let us talk about that. Initially, it will be like, very Wikipedia thing. So what I'm going to talk about: sun as a source of energy, basics of light, black body radiation. So up to this point, third point, I think you all have read quite a lot of time. So but this is the basics. And solar radiation, terrestrial radiations, and ultimately the measurement and the data of the solar radiation, that is what the most important part for us. Okay, so I will quickly go through all this sun and light. So of course it's a primary source. It works on nuclear fusion. It has got very high core temperature. Sun surface temperature is about 6,000 to 8,000 Kelvin. And the basic Einstein's formula can be calculated for what is the energy being given by the sun. Obviously, that energy reaches to us. I think about 8 minutes it requires for one photon to get from sun and to reach to earth. And if you try to calculate the power which is received by the earth, it is about 10 raised to 17 watt. So that is about 10 raised to 11 gigawatt. Okay, and just to give the idea, India requires about 500 gigawatt. So, I mean, this is the power received by the earth. But my point is that earth is receiving so much of power that, even the total, all the countries taken together, that power is more than what we require. So that's the importance of solar power. And if we can utilize it within this efficiency, I think it can solve, the single source can solve our energy problems. Okay, so solar energy is transferred through radiation from the surface of sun to us, and then when it enters the atmosphere, the power, there is loss in power. It gets absorbed by the atmosphere, also by the different different objects, either man-made or natural, and ultimately the panel receives this radiation, and then it creates it converts into electricity. So this energy is basically into a spectrum which has got gamma rays to long radio waves, and out of that our interest is only in the visible spectrum from blue to red. Please remember the wavelengths. Blue is somewhere around 400 and red is around 700, and that is in nanometers. Sometimes we'll be using in micrometers. You should remember these wavelengths. And green is somewhere around 550. So light, wave or particle, you know the dual nature of this, and what we are interested in the photons. So that is light we are viewing not as a wave or particle, but something as simple as a photon, and that is the packet of a particle of energy. So this is the collection of waves, so that will be interacting with the materials, so that we can produce, the semiconductor material can react to it. So sometimes we consider it as a wave, and sometimes we consider this photon as a particle. So this is what generally happens, and that is also photoelectric effect. So a photon is bombarded, or it falls down on the metal surface or any semiconductor surface, then it excites some electron. The energy is defined by the wavelength of the photon or the velocity of the electron which is being knocked out and all that. So the important characteristics that what we are interested as far as this incident solar energy is, what is the content in whatever the spectrum that we are receiving of the incident light, and that obviously moreover is constant. How much then with this spectral content we can find out what is the power density which is available by the sun, and this power, of course, it is what you call it is focused into one direction, right? And that direction changes when the sun changes its position depending upon either the season or the time of the day. So you must have already noticed the movement of the sun over the year, and that's why the panels are fixed, and the sun always changes its angle, and obviously that controls how the incident solar radiation strikes the module, and that's why the received power is different at a different point of time in a year. So this is what we have to basically calculate, that how much is the energy which is received throughout the year at a particular on a particular panel. So this energy of photon is given by E is equal to hc by lambda with the standard notations. So you can substitute these constants and you can get the value of E. I will give you that later. But what we are interested is not just the photon. We are interested in what is the wavelength of that particular photon. So if you substitute, red was the higher one, 700, and blue ones was around 400. So obviously, blue carries more energy. Because Hc is constant, so energy is inversely proportional to lambda. So what we are interested in, if there is a blue photon and if there is a red photon, obviously what we will be preferring is a blue photon, point number one, because it has got more energy. And also we will prefer it because, let us say we are using silicon as a semiconductor, it is highly probable that the bluish photon will have more energy compared to the band gap of the silicon. So this inverse relationship, that is what we have to understand. So high energy photons, which are blue light, it has got shorter wavelength, and low energy photons, that is red light, it has got long wavelength. I think I have asked the question in last our practical that why red light is red. I mean, stop signal is red. Okay, because it has got longer wavelength, so that you can see it from a far distance. So this energy is normally measured in joule, but for our semiconductor applications, that unit doesn't really good for us. So we convert it into electron volt. So 1 electron volt is the energy required to raise electron through 1 volt. So we can substitute this 1 electron volt, and then you can revise that formula. And if you substitute Hc and try to convert this joule, you get a much simpler formula, which you can remember. E, that is in EV, is equal to 1.24 divided by lambda. Now it is in micrometers. So let us say 0.7, that is for red light. So 1.24 divided by 0.7, not 700 nanometers. So simply you get 1.24 by 0.7 is roughly, I think, around 2.1, whatever it is. Okay, so that is what the energy content of that red photon. And obviously you can understand, if it is a blue photon, it is 0.4, then it becomes about 3.3 electron volts. Okay, so that is what the energy, this is the simplest formula you should remember to calculate the energy. Now, of course, we don't receive 1 or 2 or 3 photons. We received, in a much larger amount, and that's why we call it as photon flux. It is something very similar to what we call it as electric flux. So how many number of photons we are receiving per second per meter square? So that is what the standardization is. So depending upon these numbers, and also later we will understand that, which kind of photon, whether it is a blue photon or red photon, we can find out the amount of light, or amount of power or the energy content of this whole photon flux. So that is called, we call it as power density. And as it is a power density, unit is watt per meter square. So how much power we are receiving from this incidence photons. So now, depending upon what is the unit and how exactly you are using the different quantities, you can have a different variety of formula for H, which is the power density. The unit remains same, watt per meter square, but only your calculations are in different, how you are substituting the values. So you can find out this H, and normally that as the function of this photon wavelength, F is the most common way of characterizing the light source. So I will give you anyway. So if you can, if you know, the unit of power density was watt per meter square, but as I've said, that is only for photon, but photon can be of blue or red or whatever color. So that's why it is associated with the wavelength as well. So instead of just calling watt per meter square, now we are defining this one more quantity, that is spectral irradiance, and that's why the unit also changes. Now it is watt per meter square per micrometer. So it is specific to the particular wavelength So power density at whatever wavelength I'm specifying. So I can define that F in terms of the wavelength. So all if everything is constant, you can see F is inversely proportional to lambda. And now here we can compare what exactly is happening so that we can understand what is this spectral density actually means and how it really affects. Okay, so I think we have discussed in the last illumination lab as well. There are a variety of artificial lamps. It can be halogen, it can be mercury or xenon lamps, whatever. So you can see they are very much, they don't give white light, first of all. And understand white light means all the wavelengths are present. However, these artificial lamp doesn't do that. So you can see the spectral irradiance versus wavelength graph is quite what you say spiky. Okay, but if you see this magenta line, you can see that it is a very smooth graph, and it means that moreover it contains all the waveform, all the wavelengths from 400 to 700, and that's why we get about absolutely white light. And that is what the objective of making the artificial lamp, that we should get as much as white light so that we can mimic the presence of the sun. So as the lamp varies, this thing is going to vary. A simple example is if you take the incandescent lamp, you know that the reddish pattern is more, so you will get the curve something like this because it is towards reddish or orangish color which is coming up. Now, apart from that, we know that 400 to 700 is not the only spectrum that sun spectrum has. It has got from ultraviolet to infrared, and every wavelength carries the energy with it. And this is the another problem. When we talk about the complete utilization of spectrum, we are interested in visible radiation, and that carries only 50% the energy. Rest of it is absolutely wasted, and this is where 43% is in infrared radiation, but we do not have the materials to convert that. Of course, some research is going on, but that's not really it doesn't have really good results. So you can see that with this 43%, literally we cannot do anything. By the way, this infrared is what carries more heat, and that is what used for drying and other things. So spectrum is already distributed, and still we want to utilize, even we are not able to utilize this 48% perfectly. So our job will be to utilize that 48%. Now we have got this power density. So the total power density, as it is dependent on lambda, total power density can be calculated by the integration. So you can integrate from 0 to infinity for all the wavelengths. And as far as the modeling of this source is concerned, we can do it in a black body radiation. Of course, black body absorbs all the radiation. And if we want that formula, we can, in terms of wavelength, this is what given by the Planck's radiation law. And this you can substitute in H, and you can find out the complete value of H. So we can find out the power from sun, and when you substitute, do all these things and simplify the formula, it can be H is equal to sigma into T raised to 4, and simplification can further be done. You can also use Stefan-Boltzmann law so that you can put it in terms of the radiation constants or the emissivity of the material, and also sigma is also sigma is also the Boltzmann constant. So you can find out the power which is given by this, but it can be more simplified. That is the Wales law. So it's very simple. Lambda is equal to 2900 by T. So this lambda is the peak, where if you plot this curve of H or P, then you will find out the peak at a particular temperature, which is given by, at a particular wavelength, which is given by this particular Wales law. I can give you the example. So this is what I mean. You can see that there is a peak on the spectral intensity graph, and it occurs, it can be found out by 2900 by T. So these temperatures, these four graphs are for different temperatures, and moreover it is about that more in between 0.5 to 0.75 microns. Okay, so this is how as the temperature of the black body increases, you can see that the spectral intensity also is also going to increase, and the power distribution is going to be towards the lower wavelengths. Okay, that's why bluer will be the more important part. So definitely there is a role of temperature over here. So we can also find out the effect of this effect of heating on color of the light emitted. So let us say if you are hitting the bulb at 3000 Kelvin, it will be glowing red. However, when you increase the temperature to 6000 Kelvin, you will find out that the blue light starts emitting from that radiation. Sorry, from that source. So heating, temperature, and color, all these are related because of the fundamentally the photoelectric effect. So this is all theory. Then what exactly terms what we are going to use for this radiation? There are two, and they are confusing because irradiance, that is the first term. In simple terms, it is power density, so the unit is watt per meter square. But then we use one more term that is called as irradiation or insolation. Now the difference is this is the energy term. So this is the energy density. So you can see that we have added hour. So watt hour per meter square per day. So how much energy I'm going to get per meter square? So I can say that I'm going to get about 6 kilowatt hour per meter square per day. So that is the typical value that we will be assuming when we will solve the numerical for the insolation. So for when we are talking about the system, this insolation is more important to us because we are interested in energy. Understand whatever the energy which is received by the panel, that will be stored somewhere, let us say in battery. Okay, so that's why we are more interested in energy and not in the power. But obviously in some calculations we might require the power density. So next thing is how exactly these radiations are and what are the different types. So this particular picture can give you the idea. So as I've said, when the radiation travels this distance and enters the atmosphere, it is being absorbed by the atmosphere and its components. It may be dust, it may be different layers, it may be clouds. So always it gets diffuse. So the diffuse is the scattered radiation, and then there is a direct or beam radiation. So that is, so if I have to mark it, you can say if photon directly reach these panels, we call it as direct radiation. But if it reaches after reflecting somewhere, we call it as diffuse. And then there is something called as albedo. It is the reflection from some other artificial or ground, most importantly ground. So ground also reflects it. By the way, there is something called as bifacial solar cell. I'll just give you the idea. Normally solar panels are installed like this. The sun ray will come from the top, and only one side is going to what you call it as produce the power, right? But then there are bifacial cells. It means the cell on both the sides. Okay, so some reflect. Let us say something is getting reflected and coming into the panel. That energy is now also converted. Otherwise, the reflected energy is blocked from the rear side of the panel, and it cannot be utilized. So obviously, bifacial are the new trend, and it increases the efficiency. It uses this albedo and the diffuse radiations. So when we talk about the global radiation, or simply you can understand the total radiation, so it will be obviously direct plus diffuse plus albedo. So that unit value will be obviously 1. So depending upon what radiation we are getting, the output of the panels will be different. So I'll give you some idea. Also we will compare the global and diffuse, and obviously if I subtract diffuse from this global, I'm going to get what you call direct radiation. Now you can see if roughly I'm taking this as 1, the diffuse radiation is about 0.2. Of course, it depends on the day, the time of the year, and whatnot, and also the place. Okay. But this particular is for clear sky. It means there are no what you call it as clouds over there. So only atmosphere is absorbing. So you can see the curve is absolutely smooth. Okay, the diffuse radiation or global radiation both is very smooth, but that's not the practical case, and that is one of the problems which is faced by the solar sector. So let me show you the actual or on cloudy days what happens. So clear day, you can see everything is absolutely smooth. The peak is somewhere around the noon time, but on a cloudy day you can see that it is absolutely absolutely random. Here probably you can fit on left hand side, you can fit some curve, and you can find out approximate radiation. You can find out, you can predict what could be the power output of the power output of the plant. But here that forecasting is very difficult. So that could be one of the topic even for the research, that how are you going to forecast it for this. And this choppiness and intermittency, that is what the real problem of solar power sector is. So clear day and cloudy day, there will be absolutely what you call it as different output for the solar panels. Okay. So what we'll do is we will stop over here. It's almost more than 55 minutes, and because the next topic will be, so we can continue how exactly these radiations can be used and what are the different ways to calculate or measure and store the data. So that is all for today. By the way, yeah, any questions? Anything? Yeah. Today is, I suppose it is 9th, correct? Sorry, today is 11th. This is our third lecture.
10th.
Okay. 11th, no? Yeah, fine. So Kashyap Biswas. Kashyap Biswas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jagannath Pandit. Jagannath Pandit. Absent. Umesh Salma. Umesh Salma.
Present, sir. Present, sir.
Gaurav Pranami.
Yes, sir.
Ravindra Singh.
Yes, sir.
Ravindra Singh.
Yes, sir.
Gaurav
Yes, sir.
Pranami.
Yes,
Gaurav
sir.
Pranami. हाँ तो भाई
Yes,
एक बार
sir.
दे दिया ना अटेंडेंस, दैट्स व्हाई आई गॉट कंफ्यूज. हाँ, विश्वजीत मोहंती. विश्वजीत
Yes,
मोहंती.
Yes, sir.
ओके. ठीक है. सो एनी क्वेश्चंस?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, this is an online class. Can you go a little bit slow, because it's like means sometimes it's hard to grasp some previous topic when you're switching to another topic.
I didn't get you.
Sir, can you go a little bit slower, because sometimes
Slower in the sense what? Little bit slower in the sense what?
means while explaining the topics.
Yeah, I will try to.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.